Yes, I'm ready.
Well, welcome back. Hope everyone is warming up from the cold outside. Been a fascinating walk around, seeing various bits, and hopefully those that went to the museum enjoyed it as well. Maggie is from the museum. She's going to talk to us about various things on the social science. Adult schools.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Like some of the other speakers, I'm not a Quaker, so please forgive me if I make any gaffes in terms of terminology. I'm speaking about the first day and adult schools in Leominster. Not all adult schools, just those that were run by the Quakers. If you've been glancing through the local notes section of the Leominster News on the 1st of May 1881, you would have come across the following. First day school, men's class, mission room, every Sunday morning at 8:30 a.m. All men are earnestly invited to attend. The newspaper also contained an advertisement for Humley & Palmer's Reading cakes and biscuits, available on special terms at Newman & Sons. And the two were connected, as you will have gathered by now. The notice appeared again on the 8th of May and doubtless many other editions of the paper. The Leominster First Day or Adult School for Working Men had been founded in 1858 and by 1885 numbered 181 scholars, 10 teachers and had a library of 500 books. By 1886 a separate women's school or mission meeting was being held on Sunday afternoons in the Green Lane meeting room, and I think you may have passed the Methodist Church in Green Lane on your walk, which is where it was held. As with so many other Quaker activities in Leominster, Henry Stanley Newman was a key figure in these developments. But before describing in more detail what I've found out about Leominster schools, I want to put it into context, which is the growth of adult education in the second half of the 19th century, which was spearheaded by the Quakers. Adult schools were the first dedicated educational provision for working men and women in England. The adult school movement started in 1798 in Nottingham, when William Singleton, a Methodist, and Samuel Fox, a Quaker, started a school for young women who were working in the hosiery factories. The main focus was on literacy and to enable reading from the Bible and writing from dictation. Nonconformists, unlike other the established church at the time, laid great stress on people having direct access to the Bible, hence the emphasis on literacy. The Church of England didn't actually encourage working class people who couldn't read to learn to read, and we all draw our own conclusions as to why that might be. Anyway, from 1780 onwards, educational opportunities for adult working class men and women were extremely limited. It was William White, a printer and bookseller, and Joseph Sturge, the anti-slavery campaigner, founder of the first adult school in Birmingham in 1845, who directed the society as a whole, the Quakers, to support adult classes in school. That's the...
we have some of the lights out.
Yes, could we take some of the lights out at the back, thank you. That first slide is the part of the Quaker tapestry with which you're probably all familiar, which does commemorate the first adult day school, the first day school in Birmingham, and the people who established it. The school, when it was first set up in 1842, wasn't actually particularly successful, and it took 3 years for Sturge to actually develop a model that was effective, and it was a combination of Bible study, reading and writing. Although reading and Bible study remained a central feature of Quaker-run schools, they offered a wider range of subjects and placed a greater emphasis on students themselves being involved via discussion, fellowship and mutual aid, including book clubs, savings banks and sick funds. While it was hoped that users might join the society and attend meeting, it was not a requirement of to go to the school. You weren't required to join the meeting. Schools were established in Sunderland, York, London, Sheffield, Oldham, Darlington and other major industrial cities. And by 1899, the year in which the National Council of Adult Schools was formed, there were 350 schools involving some 45,000 participants, of whom 29,000, 2/3, were in schools run by the society. The Friends First Day Schools Association, formed in 1847 to support Sunday schools initially, became increasingly dominated by adult day schools, indicating in fact what happened in the second half of the century, which was this real flowering of adult education for working class people, working class men primarily. Initially the schools were single sex for the benefit of working men. Mark Freeman, who has analysed the records of the York School in the 1850s and 60s, concluded that the main constituency was younger, unskilled and semi-skilled men. Schools met on Sunday morning, sometimes as early as 7:30, before the Friends meeting, usually lasted an hour or an hour and a half. And while most adult schools met in Friends Meeting House or rooms, some rented bigger premises, enabling a wider range of activities, clubs and social events. With the introduction of compulsory education in the 1870s and a drop in illiteracy, schools devoted less time to reading and writing and more to talks and discussion of social issues and moral questions such as temperance, gambling and peace. Although women's classes were started in Birmingham in 1848, generally adult schools for women followed much later in the century. Often took the form of missionary meetings for the whole family on a Sunday afternoon. And there was more emphasis on crafts and homemaking skills. However, from the 1890s through to the 20th century, the significant growth in membership in schools was in the women's section. That was particularly true after 1914. The influence of Quakers in the movement also declined after the 1890s, with schools affiliated to other denominations or to none at all, and the county unions of adult schools which were formed and the National Council were non-denominational. So that's the broad context in which quick run through 50 years of adult education, but that's the context in which to view the development of the Leominster schools. I must say I found it a really frustrating couple of months while I was trying to research for this talk. There's a sort of rag bag of odd facts and memories that to put together, but nothing that pulled it all together. And that's particularly true of the men's school. The women's adult school marked its 50th anniversary in 1951 with the publication of a pamphlet that described the history, all of the activities and events, and it was incredibly useful. Nothing similar seemed to have been published for the men's school, which was really surprising given the involvement of Henry Stanley Newman, who was a prolific author, and the Orphans' Homes had an annual report, the Tract Association, the Orphans' Press. Nothing, as far as I've been able to discover, for the men's adult school. A pamphlet entitled The History of the Hereford Society of Friends First Day School by William Collins was published in 1921. Unfortunately, I couldn't get access to it because Hereford Library is closed to the public, and that's the only copy that I've been able to track down. The Leominster Society of Friends records held in the Hereford Records Office are also uninformative, with barely a reference to the adult schools, which again surprised me. I've had to rely on the Newman family papers, occasional references in the annual reports of the Orphans' Homes and the Orphans' Press, or Leominster News and Leominster Museum collection, which actually turns out probably to have the best collection about adult schools in the county. So the men's first day school was established some 10 years after the 7th Street School in Birmingham, and like so many other social innovations, it owed its origin to the Newman family. In 1856, Josiah Newman, Henry Stanley's father, reported to monthly meeting on behalf of a committee looking at the problems and costs of educating young people associated with the society. 2 years later, his 21-year-old son, and we can have the next slide now, Henry Stanley, started work in Dad's grocery and joined with Josiah and Henry Newman, his uncle, to establish the first school. Initially, as Peter said this morning, it met behind the family business, but then moved to the meeting rooms on a Sunday morning. When it grew larger, it moved to the mission room on Etnam Street, which is the museum building now. I've been unable to uncover, as I said, any information at all regarding either volunteers or the users of the school at this time. I doubt that some of the same people who assisted Sarah Alexander visit the poorer families in Leominster in 1859 and 60 were involved, namely Edward and John Southall, brothers Josiah and Henry, as we've said, and Samuel Alexander. Just to give you some idea of the scale of what they were undertaking, the total membership of the Leominster Meeting in 1859 was 37 adults, 17 men, 20 women. So it was quite an undertaking that they embarked on. I don't actually have any details either of the running of the school in Leominster, but assumed it actually followed much the same pattern as the other first day schools, at least initially, using scripture lessons to teach men to read and write and applied teaching of the Bible to everyday life. And as we know, reading and mathematics were also part of the curriculum. The Leominster Tract Association, which was started a year later, provided short, simple tracts in plain type that working men might easily read. And these were doubtless used in the school as well. The first was entitled The Wedding Garment in 1873. And by 1873, the year in which the press opened and the printing of tracts was moved back to Leominster, 276,882 tracts had been issued. Henry Stanley was a prolific author, and it's clear that a number of his works were actually intended for use in the adult school, not just the Leominster adult school, but adult schools around the country. There was Palestine Lessons to My Class, which we've heard about, and the school amassed a library, as I said, of some 500 books. Henry Stanley's son George, who became an eminent doctor, seems to have continued the family tradition, contributing papers and talks for use in adult schools. In 1899, the formation of the National Adult School Union led to them publishing annual handbooks for use in adult schools, and for every week it had a class, a plan, a text usually, and ideas for discussion and so on, and they were used as a course of study throughout the year. So we can get a pretty good idea of what went on in a typical school during the 1880s. There's a rather good book called A History of the Adult School Movement by, you'll know the name, J. Wilhelm Rowntree and Henry Bryan Binns. This was published in 1903, and they described the Bristol School in some detail. 8:25 a.m. the school opens with a welcome at the door from a fatherly man. The secretaries of the burial, sick and social clubs were on hand to receive subscriptions and provide information. School began at 8:30 with a hymn and a prayer. The men then divided into small groups to study Bible lesson for the day while the register was taken. At 9 a.m. the whole school reassembled and the secretary read out notices, introduced new members, and a collection was taken. The whole school would discuss the lesson and the president would endeavour to draw conclusions. At 9:45 a.m. the names of those absent were read and the men would leave at 10 a.m. after another hymn and prayer. They described the teaching method as essentially democratic, underpinned by a system, and it was underpinned by this system of visiting. If a school member was absent, a visitor would call to ascertain the reason why, leave cards, fruit if they were ill. It was stressed that visitors should take care not to let absentees have cause to think of them in the same light as some children look upon school board officers. There was some concern among friends about the methods adopted in first day schools to attract and retain members, notably the use of hymns and other forms of entertainment. And there was, uncertainty about the relationship between meetings for worship and the schools. Despite the growth of numbers attending the schools, there wasn't a commensurate growth in membership of the society. And although membership in Leominster did increase, as I said, there were 37 members in 1959, it increased to 53 adult members in 1900. So it does seem as though the adult school and also I think the orphans' homes did have an impact on membership locally. A census in October 1904 recorded 67 present at 11 a.m, which is the meeting for worship, and 16 at 6:30 p.m. So that's the actual membership of the society. On the same day there were 17 adults and 42 children present at the Mission Hall at 3 p.m, and 20 adults, 3/4 of them women, and 17 children at Green Lane at 6:30 in the evening. So you've got a larger group attending the schools than meeting, in other words. As attendance grew, and the emphasis on literacy decreased, schools became more involved in the discussion of social issues and took an active part in campaigns. In Leominster, throughout the 1880s and 90s, HS and other friends actively promoted temperance in the first day school and in the town as a whole. Lectures and lantern slide shows were held at the Mission Hall. There were marches and tent meetings, many of them dressed by HS. The first day school banner was raised at a Band of Hope gatherings. In 1883, for example, HS presided at a Leominster Band of Hope entertainment organised by Miss H. Southall at the British School in April, at which pledges were taken. We saw an example of a pledge there. In June of the same year, a grand temperance demonstration and procession was held in a field lent by Mr. Bright. 400 to 600 people took part in the march through town. 300 children and 1,300 adults were given tea and addressed by Henry Stanley Newman, H. Southall and Mr. Bingham of Birmingham. In early July, the Society of Friends held a week of tent services in fields belonging to Mr. Collins that attracted hundreds each weekday evening. On the 13th of July, Josiah Newman was on the platform at a gospel temperance meeting at Green Lane. It brought in 44 new pledges. And on the 27th of July, a meeting was held at the Workman's Rest by members of the first day school, addressed by Mr. J. Pugh, Henry Millwood, Mr. Hamilton, J.D. Williams and others to discuss how to spread the word for temperance. These are all adult day school members. Members of the school gave speeches and readings and sang hymns. And the Leominster News reported many similar events throughout the decades. And you can have the next picture, which does show you the first day school. Success for the first day school. And I think they are actually outside premises in Broad Street in that photograph. It's not the Mission Hall. And there's Henry in the centre. The young Henry had a much smaller beard. There he is there, anyway. Understandably, given their connections, there was and the relatively small number of friends in the town, there's a close connection between the first day school, the Orphans' Homes, the Orphans' Press and the Leominster Tract Association, and later the Women's School and the Leominster Missionary Helpers Union. So the annual report for the Orphans' Homes in 1904 tells of a harvest Thanksgiving for the children, courtesy of the Leominster Adult School. On the 18th of September, all the windows of the schoolroom in the Mission Hall were decorated with flowers and wreaths, and the sills loaded with vegetables. The raised platform was covered in offerings, and in the middle was a huge loaf with a small loaf on top, surrounded by 80 buns, all provided by the school. In addition to tracts for the Leominster Tract Association Press, printed books and pamphlets intended for use in the adult schools. And in 1893 they published hymns and spiritual songs, edited by Joseph Storrs Fry, in a cheaper edition for mission meetings, especially for mission meetings and first day schools. It was a threepenny edition. And it stated in the introduction, "It will, we have no doubt, win its way among all the branches of the Friends from First Day School Association, of which the editor has from its commencement been a leading light." I think we can infer from this that the Leominster Adult School and meeting weren't opposed to singing, which some were. H.S. Newman remained president of the adult school until his death in 1912. I've been unable to find any record of others who helped at the school, but I'm sure it included members of his family and others like the printer Joseph Williams, who came to work for the Orphans' Press in 1874 and later became a missionary in India. And I noticed that Effie Williams, his widow, is buried in the churchyard, in the burial ground, burial ground. There's a record of Theodore Neild, who was Henry Newman's son-in-law. That's Henry Newman, the uncle. Henry Newman's son-in-law. He addressed the adult school on the evils of betting and gambling in 1905. The period 1890 to 1910 was the high water mark for membership of the men's adult schools. And it was also a time when Quaker influence began to wane on the school. The whole issue of the relationship between adult schools and the society as a whole was became a cause of some concern, was the subject debated hotly at the Manchester Conference in 1895, which was chaired by Theodore Neild. It was clear that despite the success and popularity of the schools, it had not resulted in a significant increase in membership of the society overall. J.B. Braithwaite Jr. questioned, "Why is it that with so large a number of persons directly associated with us in our adult schools and mission meetings, so very few comparatively find their way into full membership?" Some present attributed this to the unwillingness of some members to welcome working class members to the meeting. And to the notion, still widely prevalent, that the Society of Friends is a sort of close corporation, admission into which can only be obtained by the accident of birth or good social position, combined with a considerable amount of the world's goods. And this is obviously a challenge not only to the older, more establishment members of the society, but to the very basis of Victorian philanthropy. The attempt by younger Liberal members the majority of the middle class and university educated to cross class lines and bring adult school users into full membership ultimately failed, due in part to the rupture of the First World War and in part to the rise of other non-denominational public education opportunities such as the Workers' Educational Association and university extension classes. The decline in membership in Wales and the borders was less marked than in the cities and industrial areas, and minutes of the Leominster preparative meeting indicate that they were successful in maintaining their number and involving younger people. For instance, in August 1912, a tramp of young friends was organised by Caroline Newman, HS's daughter, Frida Southall, Hilda Neild and Kathleen Reynolds helped her. They were all next generation of those core Leominster Quaker families. In March 1914, Harriet Newman and Christabel Baker were asked to arrange extra help for the adult school, and it's clear from the minutes that women were assuming an increasingly important role. Certainly the imbalance between men and women in adult schools was noted at the 1895 Manchester Conference and may have led to demands for more women's schools. I've been unable to find information on a women's school in Leominster before 1901. The 1868 National Gazetteer entry on Leominster refers to a Friends Girls' School, and Miranda Green in Quakers in Leominster states that the women's school met in the Green Lane Rooms in 1886, but as I said earlier, I think this was probably a mission meeting open to the families of the men who were attending adult school rather than a specific school for the women. But unlike the men's school, the records of the Leominster Women's School were kept and consulted in the preparation of a Jubilee booklet, and it's fortunate they had the same secretary, Miss Twyman. I think, again, a Leominster name that appears in the records there. Miss Twyman was secretary for 45 years of the women's school from 1906. The first meeting of the women's school was held at number 4 Mission Room on Tuesday the 8th of January 1901 at 7:30 p.m. and in spite of the snowy weather, numbered 20. Founder members were Caroline Newman, who was elected president, Mrs. Hubert Reynolds, Mrs. John Smale, and Miss L. Watkins. Mrs. Reynolds read the minutes received from the men's school asking that a women's school be established. The objects of the school were to create opportunities for the gaining of knowledge, the sharing of experience, the development of personality, and the promotion of friendship, and an understanding of the divine in Jesus. Mrs. Reynolds then read the programme of lessons for the first year and the elected officers, and the next slide shows you Caroline Newman, later Mrs. Eddington, that's later in life, who was the first president. Meetings took the usual form, starting with hymn, prayer and Bible reading, followed by a subject of study, the business of the savings bank, clubs, perhaps a social activity, and circulation of one and all, the monthly journal of the adult school movement. The National Adult School Council issued the handbook annually that contained essays and so on for a basis of study. As with the men's schools, the women's school was underpinned by that same system of regular visiting, and membership grew quickly. There were tea parties and supper parties, trips by horse-drawn brakes to Birch Common, Almley, Darnston and Ludlow, and summer rambles, as well as purposeful study. By October 1907, they had raised sufficient funds through jumble sales and sewing to buy a piano. And Mrs. Neild declared the piano open, and Miss Norgrave, secretary of the adult school savings bank, she was the adult school savings bank, she played the first solo on the piano. In 1909, under the leadership of Mrs. Hubert Reynolds, the whole school went on a train outing to Liverpool. The next slide shows you 4 women from the Leominster Women's Adult School attending the very first summer school for women held at Fircroft, the Working Men's College in Birmingham. And that was printed as a postcard, I think, while they were attending there, and then sent back to one of the other members of the adult school. I can't identify. At some stage, I'm hoping to. I only found this on Friday, this picture, so yesterday. So there are 4 of them, anyway, from the school. This conference had a major impact because afterwards they came back and completely reorganised the school, and they decided to have 3 separate classes, and they divided up. So the classes were Miss Newman and Mrs. Hoff ran one, Mrs. Reynolds and Miss Norgrove ran the second one, and Miss Twyman and Miss Burden ran the third. And they met separately after their devotional half an hour, and they took turns, each of the classes, A, B and C, to provide entertainment for the others. And the next slide shows you Class C, dressed in their Pierrette costumes, obviously ready to entertain the whole school after a meeting. In 1911, the Leominster News reported on the progress of the school, saying, when it was opened, it was at once seen that it met a real need. The school has quietly and gradually developed. The whole of the work is distinctly educational. The Tuesday evening is thus arranged. First half hour is given to social intercourse and the business of the various clubs connected with the school. The second half an hour is directly educational, subjects such as hygiene, ventilation, plant life, mothercraft, for example, being taken. And the third half hour is devoted to a Bible talk. Each month one of the classes is responsible for organising a social and the whole school attend. There were 115 attended the most recent one when that was reported in 1911. The next slide shows you the whole school on an outing to Bircher Common. I think this is around 1912. Again, they have their banner and a wonderful collection of hats. It's interesting to note that whereas the men's school failed in their plans some years previously to open a branch, the women succeeded. And realising that women who lived in the south of the town, Mill Street, Bridge Street, the old Ludlow Road, that area, had difficulty attending regular meetings, all the way up in Edmund Street, they hired 2 rooms at 93 Bridge Street, which was owned by a pig farmer, James Bassett, and furnished them and installed a small organ and held an at-home at which 19 members enrolled. The first meeting, Mrs. Hoff gave a cookery lesson on how to make a cheap and wholesome plum pudding. And the next slide shows you the committee of that Bridge Street School in 1911. A year later they had 42 members. Average attendance was 21. Miss Caroline Newman, paid for gas lighting at the rooms. And the only difference really between this school, the branch smaller than the main Etnam Street School, was they closed annually for hop picking, which tells you something about the difference in class between the 2 schools. I think the more working class women attended the Bridge Street School. The first 20 years of the 20th century marked the heyday of the adult schools in Leominster, but the deaths of Mary Anna Newman in 1908 and Henry Stanley in 1912 could be seen as the end of a period of almost continuous growth and development in which they'd had a leading role. Mrs. Harriet Spurrier's photograph album, which is in the Leominster Museum, contains many fascinating pictures of the women's school during its early years, many of them of the Newman cottage at Bircher, which was used for meetings and outings. The Mission Court at Etnam Street was busy with school meetings, mission meetings, socials and lectures. And 2 pictures of the adult school nativity play, which are the next 2 slides. In 1912, sorry, that is out of order. Could you just go on? Yes, there we are. This is the 1912 nativity play. Mrs. Sparrow did all the costumes for this. And that's the cast at Mission Court. And the next one, you get an even better picture. That's Mission Court that they're in. So that's what it looked like at the time. Caroline Newman resigned as president on her marriage. Quite surprisingly, in 1913, members of the school sewed her part of her trousseau. That previous picture, I don't know whether we can go back to or not, but it was of the conference planning committee. They had a weekend conference in Leominster, and that's the planning committee at the Bircher cottage that belonged to Miss Newman at Bircher Common. And what's wonderful is they're all doing something. Like, basket weaving, there's lots of sort of equipment and instruments going on, but there they all are. I haven't yet been able to identify them, but when you look at the photographs in detail, the same faces appear. So, I could tell you a lot more about the 20th century because there's a lot of information about the women's school, but we'll quickly just slide through the rest of the slides because we've run out of time. So the next one is the women's school in the 1920s. So numbers are still good. They declined during World War I, but in 1919 they held an industrial exhibition in the Church Institute that reaffirmed their commitment to developing women's skills and knowledge and their contribution. And there were exhibits from London and Birmingham. The women of Lentwardine put on an exhibition of handmade toys that they'd made, which were very popular. Mrs. Hubert Reynolds became president when Miss Newman left, and she forged really close links with the Adult School Union. And there's a slight lessening, you feel, of the sort of local ties with the society, although Miss Norgrove, Miss Twyman, they were members of the society, and they remained absolutely key members of the school. They started doing amateur dramatics, Scenes from Cranford, Larks for an Hour, The Fatal Hour, and The Village Shop were certain titles. And the other thing in the 1920s and 30s, there was a closer association between the men's and the women's schools. And I think that's because the decline in numbers at the men's school meant that certain activities were viable when they got together. And if you go on to the next slide, here is this is Mrs. Jarley's waxworks, and there are men, they're not masquerade, there are men as part of this production. In fact, that's 1926. 1925 was a year of their first joint production, which was Pilgrim's Progress, which the very famous Mr. Storbarber adapted for them. Anyway, quick run through just the last couple of slides. There's Miss Newman, Harriet, the oldest daughter of Henry Stanley, who took over as president when Mrs. Reynolds left. Was president from 1931 to 1931 to 1938, and she kept the school going and moved it back from the mission hall back to this building, where it remained until the wartime, and during the Second World War it moved back to the mission hall, and then post-war, just quickly, in post-Second World War, the new president, Mrs. Norman Davis, one of her main ambitions was for the adult school. It was called the adult school. It was essentially the women's adult school at this time, to have their own premises. And they fundraised and they bought and refurbished the old Wesleyan chapel in Burgess Street. And in 1954, and if we go on, there's another picture. I'll carry on. That is the opening in 1954 of the Leominster Adult School Hall, which is where the women's school continued to meet until 1973. in the museum, there's the visitors book, there's memberships lists. We know the names and addresses pretty well of everyone who in the 50s, 60s and 70s was attending the women's adult school. So for the purposes of family history, if any of you are interested in pursuing that, the museum is actually the place to go. It's all there. Sorry to rush through on that last bit, but I just want to read you, just if Debs will forgive me for taking up a bit more time. Just to say that, you know, looking back on the history of the schools, it's clear that although they had relatively few members, they did have a significant impact of education in the broadest sense for individuals and the town as a whole. I think it was particularly true for the women members in the first half of the 20th century. School offered time away from the demands of work and family, and the opportunity to experience different things and meet different people. It's remarkable reading some of the women's accounts of the first time they spent away from home was at a summer school in the 20s and 30s in places like Birmingham and Bournemouth, and meeting people from all around the country was inspirational for them and opened, you know, new horizons. I'll just give you the last word of Mrs. A.M. Harrison, who actually was responsible for giving to the museum some of these record books. She was a member of the school in the 1950s, and she wrote this to commemorate the move to the Burgess Street School in 1954. Many years of yesterdays have passed since so humbly did those brave souls meet to form and start a school, our school, with years of hope and hope of future years. One little room with such high hopes, past 50 years or more. History we make today. How proud we feel to have this hall we now behold. Many milestones we've passed, many loved ones we have lost. We value still those members of that little band. What memories they hold. We know and understand our one desire and theirs through these long years, where we could meet to carry on the noble work for which our adult school stands.
Good.